in our study of why do I need the church, and specifically looking at today the reality of how we strengthen each other. And today I'm actually using my earpiece as the microphone. Last week I had it in there, but I was actually listening to music while I was teaching you guys. It's been a crazy day. I was listening to a little bit of classical music, and it helped me maintain my focus, or at least I felt like it did. If you don't think it did, go back and watch last week's video and come back and tell me whether or not you thought it helped me maintain my focus. Anyways, we're in Ephesians chapter 5 today, and we're going to be going verses 8 through, I think it's verse 23. You may see me duck in and out of the screen here for just a few minutes as I move around today, and really having a hard time sitting still today. Usually. Most of the time. So, we're going to look at this idea of the role that we play in strengthening others, and to use an illustration that our author uses. Imagine going to a gym and lifting weights and getting into a position where you're unable to lift the weights off of your chest, and not having a spotter there to help you, not having somebody ready to take the weights off of you, and not having someone ready to make sure that you're safe. And so the challenge is to foresee the reality of the role that the church plays in helping us strengthen each other. And I think that's a viable illustration. I think it's a good illustration to kind of kick off this passage. There's a lot going on in Ephesians chapter 5. I mean, there's so much imagery, especially to the first century church. They would have seen some things and been like, oh man, Paul's really cracking on us here, or man, Paul's really helping us over here. That it's not so easy for us to see at first glance, and that's okay, but we're going to do it in our time allotted. We're going to do it in less than 18 minutes today. So as we do that, let's just keep this in mind. There's so much visual imagery here, and so much that we could choose to dwell on. But we're looking at this from the overall perspective of the role that the church plays in our life, and why we need the church, why we need other believers, and why we need other meetings and other opportunities to fellowship together, and those sorts of things. All right, so chapter 5, verses 8 through 14. For once you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. For the fruit of the light consists of all goodness, righteousness, and truth, testing what is pleasing to the Lord. Don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what is done by them in secret. Everything exposed by the light is made visible. For what makes everything visible is light. Therefore it is said, get up, sleeper, and rise up from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Now, some of you guys may have a super spiritual parent who has quoted that verse, get up, sleeper, to you. If you haven't, then maybe you don't have a parent. Maybe you didn't realize they were quoting a verse. They did say, get up, lazy head. And or sleepy head. So Paul is giving us here this perspective of what it looks like as believers come together and as they work with each other and among each other. And the first thing he does, and I think it's very significant, is he calls us children that are light. Children are light. And let me just say, but now you are light in the Lord. This is in the first verse, verse 8. Paul says you are light, not you are of light, not you are in the light, but we ourselves as children of God are God's light in the world. And a lot of times when we think of that, we think of things that we can do to make that better, maybe things that we can try harder about, and nothing wrong with any of that. But the reality of what Paul is saying here is, as believers, we are Christ's representatives. The good, the bad, the ugly, we are Christ's representatives in the world, okay? And so, then he breaks that down. He says, so live as that kind of person. Live as the children of light. Well, what does it mean here when he says light? I mean, and what he has challenged the Ephesians all the way through. Last week, you remember, he told them, he said, hey, don't live like the Gentiles. Guess what? They were ethnically Gentiles. And now he's telling them not to live like Gentiles. Well, what's he doing? He was challenging their methods of thought, their ideas, and the ways that they reason things out. He was saying, don't live like you used to. Don't use the same ideas and the same symbolisms and the same perspectives that you used to use. Challenge yourself. Get a new perspective. And this is what he is saying here. Live as children of light. In other words, do not live clouded by the way that your culture forces you to. And now here's the thing, and listen to me on this one if you can. This is 21st century. We're in the southern part of the United States of America, and very few people my age and older have ever questioned whether or not our culture is right. Now wait a minute. Let me just repeat that. Very few have questioned whether our culture is right. You say, oh, no. My grandparents all the time are complaining about culture, and my parents all the time are complaining about culture. Now, they're complaining about that culture. Very few of us are addressing our culture. In other words, Bible Belt culture. Culture of morality versus culture of redemption. And I don't want to get us too far off base here, but the idea is we are called to live in light. And what that means is that we allow God's light to permeate everything that we do in such a way that we are constantly questioning whether or not the way that we are going about it and the people and the way that we are dealing with others is the correct way. Think sometimes we get this idea, oh, well, if I just do it like my grandparents did, or if I just go to church X number of times, or I just read the Bible X number of times, and if I put a Bible on the dashboard of my truck and put a flag on the tailgate of my truck or in the back window of my truck, then I'm basically a Christian. And Paul is saying, no. This whole reality is your life is supposed to be lived in light. And then he says, and don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness. And what is the fruit of light? Let's go back. Goodness, righteousness, and truth. Goodness, righteousness, and truth. If we are not being good to others, if we are not being fair to others, and we're not living in truth, then we're not living in light. And I mean good to enemies. Remember, Jesus taught that pretty specifically. Be good to those who would destroy you, persecute you. And then he says, don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness, but expose them. And he says, and eventually everything's going to come to the light anyways. By the way, it's the same promise that Jesus tells Nicodemus in John chapter 3. He's like, here's the thing, everything's coming to the light. And the only reason people don't come to the light is because they love what they're doing. They love what they were getting from it. Okay? And then the idea is that we wake up and shine. And so as he begins this challenge, or we look at it from the challenge of how we should strengthen each other, we see that Paul says, man, we're supposed to live as a unique group of people. And I would challenge you that in your life and in my life, that we recognize as children of God that we are supposed to be living as a unique group of people, even within the religious culture that we already inhabit. Even within the religious church that we already attend. That is not minimalizing anyone in the church. That is not saying the people in the church aren't. I am simply saying that I have been in church long enough to know that tradition many times trumps what is right. Because I do it. I fall into the same habit. Look right, dress right, smile right. People think you are right. And yet Paul says we need to be careful and live in the light. So we see this challenge. Did y'all see that? I literally just licked my finger. It's been like 5 months since I licked my finger. We're not supposed to lick our fingers, are we? Yeah, turn a page or something. Ah, goodness. It shakes me to my core. Alright, so quarantine done got me crazy. So, Paul is talking about how, as children of light, we come together and we expose darkness. Now, go back to how we don't challenge culture. Is darkness our attitudes? Is darkness our statements that we make about others? Or is it sneaking off and doing some morally reprehensible behavior? Well, it's both. It's both. And we, if we're going to expose the darkness, have to begin by addressing it within our culture. When someone speaks from an attitude or a position of hate or a position of condemnation, of mockery, we have to respond to that. We have to help push that back. Now, we have to do it in a way that is helpful. We have to do it in a way that allows for the light, and not for us, and not for our way of doing things. But anyways, so that's the first thing we see. The second thing is, now we have to really be careful about how we live, because that's what he says. Look at verses 15 through 17. I'll read them for you here. Pay careful attention then to how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time, because the days are evil. So don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Okay, so you want to live a life that's good, you want to live a life that strengthens others. Here's the thing, you got to plan it out. That literally is what he's saying. When he says pay attention, he's like, have a plan. Have a plan. What time are you going to get up? What time are you going to go to bed? What are you going to do in the meanwhile? Well, how are you going to spend your time? How much time are you going to spend on this? How much time are you going to spend reading? How much time are you going to spend playing video games? How much time are you going to spend practicing for a band, practicing your schoolwork, doing your schoolwork, practicing a sport? What are you going to do with your time? He says this, not as unwise people, but as wise. In other words, unwise people simply let everything come to them, and then they make the best decision for them in that moment. Because lack of wisdom essentially is selfishness, and so wisdom is taking the correct knowledge and applying it correctly in that moment, in that circumstance. You and I both know we're limited by time. We both know we're going to have things that distract us. We all know that we're going to have things we want to do, and we should accommodate for those things within reason and plan our lives. Paul says plan your life, making the most of the time. Why? Because the days are evil. And remember this word evil, and I've been doing a study in the book of Proverbs simultaneously with this one as well on the church channel. And essentially evilness can be boiled down to selfishness, because the days are selfish. Now you think about that. How did you wake up planning to spend your day today? Did you accommodate for others? Did you plan for others? Christy and I sometimes joke, and kids, don't get offended. Well, if you get offended, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry you were offended. Isn't that how you do apologies now? I'm sorry if you were offended. No, it's a joke here, but we sometimes wake up and we'll be sitting there maybe eating lunch or eating breakfast or doing whatever it is we're doing. We'll say, what are we going to feed and fix for tonight? What are we going to feed the kids for supper? What are we going to eat for supper? And one of us sometimes will look at the other one and joke and say, do they need to eat again? Well, of course they need to eat again. And here in America, we generally eat 3 meals a day. But the idea is, we just cooked supper last night. Do you really need to eat again? Of course they do. But the point that Paul is making here is that every day is going to press you into making a decision that promotes self or promotes others or promotes God. So the days are evil, and the typical routine of your day is going to lead you to selfish behavior if you don't plan it. Why? He says, make the most of your time, because the days are evil. Your natural progression is going to lead to destruction. It's going to lead to lack of scheduling, lack of correct eating, lack of exercise. I mean, if you just wake up doing what you want to do, it's going to go downhill. Okay, so you have to plan it out. And he says, then don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. So, well, wait a minute. I don't understand what God's will is. If I knew what God's will is, I would do it. If you're a child at home, God's will is children obey your parents and the Lord. So, well, okay. What else is it? Well, children seek after wisdom. Well, okay, what else is it? I mean, the idea that God has this hidden secret will somewhere that you got to go on a treasure hunt to find is ludicrous. And it's ridiculous. And the people that teach that usually are into emotionalism and seeking to control others. The reality of it is, don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Well, we're about to look at what the Lord's will is here in the next couple of verses, and it's going to really challenge our thinking. So what do you do when things aren't going good? What do you do when things don't feel good? What do you do when you don't feel good? I mean, it's a tough, if you're an adult watching this, or even a kid watching this, it's kind of a tough question to ask right now. You kids have been separated, many of you, from your friends for the last several months. You've not been able to go to school and do the things that you have normally done socially. adults, I mean, I don't even want to get into some of the stuff that we've had to deal with, but it's been difficult. So what do you do when you feel discouraged? What do you feel when you're a little down in the dumps? Well, the Ephesians knew what to do. They went and got a new bottle of wine. Right? A bottle of wine fixes a lot of things, doesn't it? Well, let's read what Paul says. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 18 through 21. And don't get drunk with wine, which leads to reckless living, but be filled by the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making music with your heart to the Lord, giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another in the fear of Christ. Well, if we look at these verses here, you need to understand that what Paul is doing here is he is giving two options for working through your circumstances and the difficulties of your life. Two options. Option number one, get a bottle of wine. And Paul says if you do that, don't get drunk with it. Don't imbibe so much trying to cheer yourself up that you actually begin to live a reckless life. Okay? And so the idea is that this person would imbibe enough of the wine to change their perspective on life, which would lead to ridiculous and reckless living. Set in direct contrast to that was this idea of singing psalms and spiritual songs that would encourage someone's spirit and make music and give thanks, which would lead to care of others. See how that works? Let me read it to you. Speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making music with your heart to the Lord. So, bottle of wine versus the singing. Giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So Paul says you can go drink all the wine, or you can participate in praise to God through music and by reciting the thanks that you have for God. Now, he said, if you choose the wine, then you're going to have reckless living, which is going to ultimately be selfish living. Paul says, if you choose the singing and the quotation or the reciting of God's goodness, then you're actually going to submit to other people in Christ. Now, the idea there is you're going to work with other people. Remember, this whole picture is of strengthening each other in Christ. So Paul says, you got two choices here. You can go take the wine, and it's going to lead to selfish behavior, or you can sing and quote spiritual songs and give thanks to God, and that's going to lead to cohesiveness in your relationship with others. So that's the challenge. Why do I need the church? Well, you need the church to strengthen each other. And you need the church because the option is wine, which leads to reckless living, or praising God, which leads to encouragement and help for each other. Thank you. God bless you.